Stop right there. Hands where I can see them.
Whoa, what's the problem? I'm just walking.
Keep your hands up. Turn around.
Seriously, officer, what's going on?
We got a report of a car theft suspect matching your description. Keep your hands where I can see him.
You got the wrong guy. I'm off duty. Look, FBI, Special Agent Harris.
Officer Tyler Bronson had only 4 months on the Miami Police Department when he made the kind of decision that doesn't just end a career, it stains your name forever. It happened on a quiet morning in a peaceful residential neighborhood, the kind of place where nothing dramatic happens. People walk dogs. Sprinklers quietly ticked across trimmed lawns. He saw a black man walking casually down the sidewalk wearing gray shorts, a dark blue hoodie, blue running shoes, holding coffee and a wallet in his hand. Nothing suspicious. No sign of crime. But Bronson convinced himself in that moment that this man was scouting cars. He decided to intervene before anything even existed. The man he targeted was Special Agent Harris, a federal FBI agent. What happens next costs the department over $2 million and destroys Bronson's entire future. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like these need to be shared, and your support helps us bring more truth to light. A quiet neighborhood in Miami where the streets are lined with palm trees and the houses sit back from the road with manicured lawns. Morning had just broken, soft light, cool air, the kind of calm that makes you forget you're in a city at all. This was the kind of place where people jogged before work, where retirees walked their dogs, where nothing ever really happened. It was 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday. Special Agent Harris had been with the FBI for 11 years. 11 years working cybercrime, organized fraud investigations, and multi-agency task forces. He'd testified in federal court. He'd coordinated with Interpol. He'd been recognized twice for excellence in field work. His supervisors trusted him. His colleagues respected him. But that morning, he wasn't working a case. He wasn't executing a warrant. He wasn't even in agent mode. He was just a man taking a morning walk. Harris lived 3 blocks from where the incident would occur. He'd gone out for his usual routine, a light jog, then a cool-down walk with coffee from the corner cafe. Gray athletic shorts, dark blue hoodie, blue running shoes, his wallet in one hand, his coffee in the other. He wasn't looking into cars. He wasn't casing homes. He was just existing. But sometimes, for some people, that's enough. Tyler Bronson was 24 years old. He'd graduated from the police academy 4 months earlier, full of energy, idealism, and the kind of confidence that comes from believing you're going to make a difference. He wanted to be proactive. He wanted to catch criminals before they acted. He wanted to be the officer who saw patterns others missed. His training officer had signed off on him 2 weeks prior, clearing him for solo patrol. No major incidents in his file yet. No complaints. Just a rookie trying to prove himself. That morning, Bronson was assigned to a residential patrol route in Coral Gables, one of the quieter zones, the kind of assignment that let newer officers get comfortable without too much pressure. He drove slowly through the tree-lined streets, windows down, radio low, scanning. And then he saw him, a black man, walking down the sidewalk, holding something in his hands, moving at a relaxed pace. To most people, it would have looked like a neighbor out for a morning stroll, someone who belonged. But Tyler Bronson saw something else. This is where bias becomes action. Bronson didn't see a federal agent. He didn't see a professional with a spotless record. He didn't see someone who lived in the neighborhood, who paid taxes, who had every right to walk down that street. He saw a black man in a hoodie. And in his mind, trained by years of media narratives, shaped by implicit bias he'd never examined, that image connected to crime. Bronson slowed his patrol car and watched. Harris walked past a row of parked cars. He glanced at one briefly. A casual look, the kind anyone gives when walking past something shiny or unfamiliar. Bronson's mind filled in the rest. He's checking door handles. He's scouting. He's planning something. None of it was real. But Bronson believed it anyway. He pulled over, put the car in park, and stepped out. This was proactive policing, he told himself. This was stopping crime before it happened. This was doing his job. But there was no crime. There was no victim. There was no evidence. There was only assumption. Oh, you think rookies should be required to do psychological bias courses before patrol solo? Drop your answer below. Tyler Bronson closed the patrol car door and walked toward Harris, his hand resting on his duty belt. Excuse me, Bronson called out, his tone firm. Can I talk to you for a second? Special Agent Harris stopped and turned. He saw the uniform, The patrol car, the rookie confidence radiating off the young officer. He'd been through this before. Not often, but enough to know how it could go. "Good morning, officer," Harris said calmly. "What can I do for you? What are you doing out here?" Harris blinked. "Walking. I live 3 blocks that way." He gestured with his coffee cup. "You live here?" Bronson's tone carried skepticism, like the idea was implausible. "Yes, I do. What's your name?" "Harris. Special Agent Harris. I'm with the FBI." Bronson's expression didn't change. If anything, it hardened. "FBI, huh?" "Yes." "You got ID to prove that?" Harris nodded slowly. "I do. But can I ask why you're stopping me? I haven't done anything wrong." And there it was again. The question that should matter. The question that should make an officer pause and reassess. But Bronson didn't pause. "I'll ask the questions," he said, his voice sharper now. "I saw you looking into cars. You got a reason for that." Harris frowned. "Looking into cars? I was just walking. I glanced at a vehicle. That's not a crime. Depends on your intent." "My intent?" Harris's voice stayed calm, but there was an edge to it now. "My intent was to walk to my house. That's it." Bronson's jaw tightened. "Show me your ID." This is where the psychology of the stop matters. Tyler Bronson had already decided what he was looking at. In his mind, Harris wasn't an FBI agent. He was a suspect. Someone trying to talk his way out of trouble. Someone using the "on law enforcement" line as a deflection. Bronson had heard that tactic before, in training scenarios, in stories from senior officers. Criminals claiming to be cops, feds, military. It was a classic move. So when Harris said he was FBI, Bronson didn't believe him. And when Harris stayed calm, too calm, in Bronson's mind, it read as defiance, as smugness, as someone who thought he was smarter than the rookie cop. Bronson's adrenaline spiked. His pride kicked in, and his training, already thin, started to unravel. Harris reached slowly into the pocket of his hoodie. "I'm going to get my credentials now. They're in my pocket. Keep your hands where I can see them. They're where you can see them. I'm telling you what I'm doing before I do it. That's protocol." Harris pulled out his FBI credentials, a black leather case with his badge and identification card. He opened it and held it out. Bronson glanced at it. "Barely. That could be fake," he said. Harris stared at him, disbelief creeping into his expression. "Officer, that is a legitimate federal credential. You can verify it. Call your dispatch. Call the FBI field office. My badge number is right there. Anyone can buy a badge online. This isn't from online. This is real. I'm a special agent. I've been with the Bureau for 11 years." Bronson's hand moved closer to his baton. "I think you need to come with me so we can sort this out." Harris's voice stayed controlled, but the frustration was building. "Sort what out? I've identified myself. I've shown you my credentials. There's nothing to sort out. You stopped me without cause. I stopped you because you were acting suspicious. I was walking. You were looking into cars. I glanced at a car. Once. While walking. That's not suspicious behavior, and you know it." Bronson stepped closer. "I need you to turn around and put your hands behind your back." Harris's eyes widened. "You're arresting me? I'm detaining you until I can verify your story." "My story? This isn't a story. This is my life. I'm an FBI agent. You're making a serious mistake. Turn around." "No." And that one word, that refusal to comply with an unlawful order, was all Bronson needed to justify what came next at IS, pre-crime assumption. The most dangerous form of policing? "Let me know what you think." The tension between them snapped like a wire pulled too tight. Tyler Bronson saw defiance. He saw resistance. He saw someone who needed to be controlled. Special Agent Harris saw a rookie making a career-ending mistake. And he was trying, desperately, to stop it before it went too far. "Officer," Harris said, his voice firm now, but still measured, "I am not resisting. I am not fleeing. I am not a threat. But I am also not going to comply with an unlawful detention. You have no probable cause. You have no reasonable suspicion. You have nothing but an assumption." Bronson's face flushed. "I have a suspicious individual refusing to comply. I'm not refusing to comply. I'm refusing to be violated. There's a difference. Turn around. Call your supervisor. Right now, before this gets worse." But Bronson wasn't listening anymore. In his mind, the situation had already escalated. Harris's calm demeanor, his legal language, his refusal to submit, it all registered as a challenge. And Tyler Bronson couldn't back down. He reached for Harris's arm. Harris pulled back instinctively. Not violently, not aggressively, but firmly. "Don't touch me." Bronson grabbed harder. "Stop resisting." "I'm not resisting. You have no right." Bronson yanked Harris's arm, trying to spin him around. Harris kept his balance, his training kicking in. "Don't escalate, don't fight back, but don't submit to illegal force either. Let go of me," Harris said, his voice louder now. "You're assaulting a federal agent." Bronson didn't let go. Instead, he pulled his bat, and everything changed. The first strike came fast, a swing aimed at Harris's shoulder, meant to create compliance through pain. Harris twisted, blocking with his forearm, the coffee cup dropping from his hand and splattering across the pavement. "Stop," Harris shouted. "I'm FBI. I'm a federal agent." Bronson swung again. This time, the baton connected, a glancing blow to Harris's ribs that sent a sharp jolt of pain through his side. Harris stumbled back, his hands up, his credentials still in one hand. "You're making a mistake. Stop." But Bronson was in it now. Adrenaline, fear, pride, all of it pushing him forward. He lunged at Harris, trying to force him to the ground. Harris resisted, not to fight, but to protect himself, to stay standing, to stay conscious. The two men struggled, locked in a confrontation that should never have happened. And then Harris's training took over. He didn't strike back. He didn't escalate. But he used his body weight, his balance, his knowledge of defensive tactics to keep from being pinned. For a moment, they were at a stalemate, Bronson trying to dominate, Harris trying to survive. And then a voice cut through the chaos. "Bronson, stand down." A second patrol car had pulled up. Officer Sandra Rivas, a 7-year veteran, stepped out of her vehicle and assessed the scene in seconds. "What the hell are you doing?" she shouted. Bronson froze, his baton still raised, breathing hard. Harris straightened, his chest heaving, his ribs aching, his credentials still clutched in his hand. "He attacked me," Harris said, his voice shaking now, not from fear, but from disbelief. "I'm a federal agent, and he attacked me." Engagement question. Why do some officers interpret calmness as defiance? Comment your thoughts. Officer Rivas walked toward them, her hand raised in a calming gesture. "Both of you, stop moving," she said firmly. Then she looked at Bronson. "What's going on?" Bronson stammered, his adrenaline still pumping. He was looking into cars. "I stopped him. He refused to comply. I identified myself." Harris cut in, his voice sharp. "I showed him my FBI credentials. He called them fake. Then he attacked me." Rivas's eyes narrowed. "FBI credentials?" Harris held up the black leather case, still open, the gold badge catching the morning light. Rivas stepped closer and examined it. Her expression shifted immediately. "Bronson," she said quietly, her tone dropping into something cold and dangerous. "This is real." "It can't be." "It's real. This is a federal badge. Active duty. Special Agent Harris, FBI." Bronson's face went pale. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Rivas turned to Harris. "Sir, I am so sorry. Are you injured?" Harris touched his ribs gingerly. "I'll survive, but I want a full report. I want his body camera footage, and I want to know what happens next." "You'll have all of it," Rivas promised. Then she turned back to Bronson, her voice dropping to a harsh whisper. "Get back in your car. Don't say another word. Don't move. Don't do anything until a supervisor gets here." Bronson nodded mutely, his hands trembling. A small crowd had gathered, neighbors on porches, a jogger stopped mid-run, someone with their phone out, recording. The evidence was everywhere. The truth was undeniable. And Tyler Bronson's career was over before it had really begun. Within minutes, a supervisor arrived, Sergeant Luis Ochoa, a 14-year veteran with no tolerance for reckless policing. He spoke briefly with Rivas, then with Harris, then finally turned to Bronson. "You attacked a federal agent?" Ochoa's voice was calm, but the anger underneath was palpable. "I didn't know. You didn't verify. You didn't call it in. You didn't listen when he identified himself. You just assumed." Bronson looked at the ground. Ochoa shook his head. "You're done for the day. Go back to the station. Don't talk to anyone. Don't post anything. Don't do anything. Internal Affairs will contact you." Bronson nodded and walked back to his patrol car, moving like a man in a daze. Special Agent Harris stood with Officer Rivas and Sergeant Ochoa, still processing what had just happened. "I need to make a formal complaint," Harris said. This wasn't just a bad stop. This was an assault on a federal agent in my own neighborhood. You'll have every resource you need, Ochoa said. The FBI will be notified. Internal Affairs will investigate. And I can tell you right now, this officer will not be on the street again. Harris nodded, but the anger was still there, simmering beneath his professional composure. I've been doing this for 11 years, he said quietly. I've worked with local PD in 6 states. I've never had an officer refuse to verify my credentials and then attack me. This isn't just incompetence. This is bias. This is what happens when you train people to see threats where there aren't any. Ochoa didn't disagree, because he couldn't. This moment, this single encounter on a quiet morning in Coral Gables, would define Tyler Bronson's life. It would cost the city millions, and it would force an entire department to confront the consequences of sending undertrained, biased officers onto the street. Should officers lose certification immediately after proven wrongful force? Drop your answer. By noon, the story had reached the FBI Miami field office. By 3 p.m., it was in the hands of federal investigators. By evening, it was national news. FBI agent attacked by Miami rookie cop during morning walk. Federal officer assaulted after showing credentials to police. Miami PD under fire after agent beaten in own neighborhood. The headlines wrote themselves. The outrage was immediate. The FBI filed a formal complaint with the Miami Police Department within 24 hours. Not a request, not a suggestion, a demand for accountability. The Department of Justice opened a civil rights investigation. Internal Affairs launched a full review of Tyler Bronson's training, his academy records, his field evaluations. What they found wasn't encouraging. Bronson had passed his academy exams, but his psychological evaluation had noted tendencies toward over-assertion in uncertain situations. His field training officer had flagged him twice for premature escalation, but signed off on him anyway, citing department staffing needs. He'd been cleared for solo patrol after just 12 weeks of supervision. The standard was 16. The department had rushed him, and now they were paying the price. Civil rights attorneys contacted Special Agent Harris within days. This wasn't just about an unlawful stop. This was about assault, battery, violation of civil rights. And it had happened to a federal agent, someone with the credibility, resources, and standing to take the case all the way. The lawsuit named Tyler Bronson, his training officer, his supervisor, and the Miami Police Department itself. The allegations were damning. Unlawful stop without reasonable suspicion, failure to verify credentials, assault with a deadly weapon, the baton, violation of federal civil rights, deliberate indifference by the department in training and supervision. The city's attorneys reviewed the case and came to a fast conclusion. This was indefensible. Body camera footage showed everything. Harris identifying himself. Harris showing his credentials. Bronson refusing to verify. Bronson attacking. There was no gray area. No ambiguity. No room for interpretation. The city settled before it went to trial. Over $2 million. Paid to Special Agent Harris. Funded by taxpayers. Tyler Bronson was terminated 6 weeks after the incident. The termination letter was brief and final. Officer Bronson engaged in conduct that violated department policy, state law, and federal civil rights statutes. He failed to exercise sound judgment, ignored established protocol, and used force without justification. His employment is terminated effective immediately, but the consequences went further. Bronson's name was entered into the National Decertification Index, a database that tracks officers who've been fired or had their certifications revoked. It meant no other department would hire him. Not in Florida. Not anywhere. His law enforcement career was over. Permanently. He tried to appeal. The union backed him initially, but once the FBI's evidence was made public, they quietly withdrew their support. Bronson issued a brief statement through an attorney. I made a serious error in judgment. I failed to properly verify Special Agent Harris's credentials, and I reacted in a way that was inconsistent with my training. I take full responsibility for my actions, and I apologize to Agent Harris and the community. It didn't matter. The damage was done. Special Agent Harris testified at the Internal Affairs hearing, his testimony measured but powerful. I didn't ask to be the face of this issue, he said. I didn't want this attention. But if my experience prevents this from happening to someone else, someone without a badge, without federal backing, without the ability to fight back, then it was worth it. He paused. Officer Bronson saw me and made an assumption. Not based on evidence. Not based on behavior. Based on bias. And when I didn't submit to that bias, he attacked me. That's not policing. That's violence with a badge. The room was silent. I've worked with good cops. I've worked with great cops. People who risk their lives to protect others. But I've also seen what happens when departments rush training, ignore red flags, and put officers on the street before they're ready. And this is the result. The Miami Police Department announced a series of reforms 6 months later. Extended field training from 12 weeks to 20 weeks. Mandatory bias training before solo patrol. Real-time body camera uploads to prevent tampering. A new review process for use of force incidents involving federal agents or other law enforcement. The reforms were significant, but they came too late for Tyler Bronson. And they came only after a federal agent was attacked in his own neighborhood, and the city had to pay millions to settle the case. Are rookie officers rushed onto the street too fast? Let me know in the comments. This wasn't an accident. Let's be clear about that. Tyler Bronson didn't stumble into a bad decision. He made a series of deliberate choices to stop a man without cause, to ignore his credentials, to escalate instead of verify, to use force instead of reason. And those choices weren't random. They were rooted in something deeper. Something that training should have addressed, but didn't. Bias. Assumption. The projection of criminality onto someone who was just existing. The uncomfortable truth is that stories like this happen because we allow them to. We allow departments to rush rookies through training because they're understaffed. We allow officers to patrol solo before they're ready because it saves money. We allow bias to go unchecked because we pretend colorblindness is the same as fairness. We allow the system to repeat the same mistakes over and over until someone with the power to fight back, someone like Special Agent Harris, forces accountability. But what about everyone else? What about the people who don't have an FBI badge? What about the people who can't afford attorneys? What about the people whose encounters with officers like Tyler Bronson don't end with million-dollar settlements? They end with injury, trauma, or death. Those stories don't always make headlines. But they're happening. Every day, Tyler Bronson's career is over. That's a fact. The city paid over $2 million. That's a fact. But accountability for one officer and one settlement isn't enough. The real question is, what changes now? Do departments finally admit that 4 months of training isn't enough? Do they finally accept that bias isn't something you can ignore away? Do they finally acknowledge that rushing officers onto the street puts everyone at risk, including the officers themselves? Because if we don't change the system that allowed Tyler Bronson to attack a federal agent in broad daylight, then we're just waiting for the next rookie, the next victim, the next $2 million settlement. Comment below if you believe rookie officers should need 2 years supervised field training before solo patrol. And if you think stories like this matter, if you believe we need to keep exposing these patterns and demanding better, then hit that subscribe button. Because we're not stopping. We're going to keep telling these stories. We're going to keep asking the hard questions. This isn't just about one officer or one victim. It's about all of us and the system we're willing to tolerate.
Sir, step away from the car. Whose vehicle is this?
It's mine. I'm just trying to go home.
People like you don't usually drive something like this. Let me see some ID.
I just wrapped up a long day at work. I'm not giving you my license. There's no reason to.
Refusing? That's obstruction. I could put you in cuffs right now.
What I'm going to do is read this. That's my judicial ID. I'm a sitting.
Rookie Officer Dylan Mercer had only been active on the Philadelphia Police Department for 7 months when he made the single most expensive mistake of his entire career. It happened in a quiet residential parking lot just after 7:30 p.m. No calls, no emergency dispatch, no threat. He simply saw a black man walking to his car and decided he didn't belong driving a car that nice. The man was wearing a black hoodie, blue jeans, and sneakers. Nothing about the moment was chaotic. Nothing about it suggested crime. But Mercer walked up anyway and demanded ID. The man told him he was going home after a long night shift. He declined to provide identification because there was no legal cause. Officer Mercer escalated instantly, and it would take only seconds before Mercer realized the man he was threatening was a Superior Court judge of the state of Pennsylvania. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like these need to be shared, and your support helps us bring more truth to light. Philadelphia. Early evening. March 12th. The parking lot outside the Parkside residential complex was quiet. Most residents had already returned from work. A few cars remained scattered across the asphalt. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows across the pavement. Officer Dylan Mercer was 23 years old and had been on the Philadelphia Police Department for 7 months. 7 months of wanting to prove he belonged. 7 months of trying to show he was more than just another rookie. 7 months of believing that assertiveness meant competence and that suspicion meant vigilance. His training officer had noted in early evaluations, Officer Mercer displays enthusiasm but struggles with threat assessment and de-escalation. Tends to interpret normal civilian behavior as potentially suspicious. Recommend additional field supervision. But Mercer had been cleared for solo patrol anyway. The department was understaffed. Training periods were shortened. Red flags were documented and ignored. In his first 7 months, Mercer had already generated 3 citizen complaints. All involved stops that were later deemed unjustified. All involved people of color. None had resulted in disciplinary action beyond verbal counseling. The pattern was forming, but no one was paying attention. That evening, Mercer was cruising through the Parkside neighborhood on routine patrol. No calls pending. No incidents to respond to. Just driving. Watching. Looking for something. At 7:34 p.m., he turned into the parking lot of a mid-rise residential building and immediately noticed a black man walking across the lot toward a parked vehicle. Late model Mercedes. Silver. Clean. Expensive. The man was dressed casually, black hoodie, blue jeans, sneakers. He moved at an unhurried pace, keys in hand, clearly heading to the car. To anyone else, it would have looked unremarkable. A resident heading to his car. Someone leaving for the day. Someone who belonged. But Dylan Mercer saw something different. He saw a black man in a hoodie approaching a luxury vehicle. And in Mercer's mind, shaped by bias he'd never examined and assumptions he'd never questioned, that combination didn't add up. People like that don't drive cars like this. He didn't think it consciously. He didn't articulate it to himself. But the thought was there, operating beneath the surface, guiding his actions. Mercer pulled his patrol car into the lot and stopped near the Mercedes. He stepped out and walked toward the man with purpose. Judge Donovan Price had been up for nearly 20 hours. At 44 years old, Price was a Superior Court judge for the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. He'd been on the bench for 6 years, presiding over criminal cases, civil litigation, and appellate matters. Before that, he'd spent 12 years as a trial attorney, specializing in civil rights law. His colleagues respected him. His rulings were rarely overturned. His reputation was built on fairness, precision, and an unwavering commitment to constitutional principles. But that night, or more accurately, that evening, had been grueling. He'd been working late on a complex case opinion, reviewing precedents, drafting language, ensuring every legal argument was airtight. By the time he finished, it was past 7 p.m. He'd showered in his chambers, changed into casual clothes, and headed to the parking lot to drive home. All he wanted was to get in his car, drive the 15 minutes to his house, and sleep. He didn't want conversation. He didn't want confrontation. He certainly didn't want to deal with a police officer. But that's exactly what was about to happen. "Excuse me." Officer Mercer called out, his tone immediately authoritative. "I need to talk to you." Judge Price stopped and turned, keys still in his hand. He saw the uniform, the patrol car, the young officer walking toward him with his hand near his belt. His first thought wasn't concern. It was exhaustion. "Not now. Not today." "Good evening, officer," Price said, his voice calm but tired. "Is there a problem? Can I see some ID?" Price frowned. "ID? For what?" "I need to verify who you are. I'm a resident here. I'm walking to my car." "What's the issue?" Mercer's eyes moved to the Mercedes, then back to Price. "That your car?" "Yes." "Can you prove it?" Price's jaw tightened. He'd been a civil rights attorney long enough to know where this was going. He'd been a judge long enough to recognize unlawful detention when he saw it. "Officer, I don't need to prove anything. I'm on private property. I haven't committed any violation. You have no legal basis to demand my identification." Mercer stepped closer. "I'm asking nicely. Show me your ID." "And I'm declining. Politely. Because you have no reasonable suspicion and no probable cause." "Are you refusing to cooperate with a police officer?" "I'm exercising my constitutional rights." "Those aren't the same thing." And there it was. The moment that could have de-escalated. The moment where a more experienced officer would have recognized the situation for what it was, a tired man walking to his own car, and walked away. But Dylan Mercer didn't walk away. If this was you, do you think this officer even wanted a legal reason, or was he simply looking for justification after the fact? Drop a comment. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like these need to be shared, and your support helps us bring more truth to light. Officer Mercer's hand moved to his radio. I'm going to call this in as a suspicious person refusing to identify. Judge Price remained calm, but his patience was wearing thin. Call whoever you want. But understand that when your supervisor arrives, I'm going to explain that you stopped me without cause, demanded ID without legal justification, and are now threatening escalation because I know my rights. Mercer's face flushed. You think you're smart? I think I'm informed. There's a difference. People like you. Price's eyes narrowed. People like me? Finish that sentence, officer. Mercer caught himself, realizing he'd almost said something he couldn't take back. People who don't cooperate make things harder for themselves. I'm not making anything harder. You are. You stopped me based on nothing. And now you're trying to justify it after the fact. Mercer's hand moved to his taser, not drawing it, just resting on the grip. A threat. A show of force. Last chance, Mercer said. Show me ID, or I'm detaining you. For what crime? Failure to identify. That's not a crime in Pennsylvania without reasonable suspicion. Which you don't have. I have suspicion. Based on what? Articulate it. What specific, observable facts led you to believe I've committed, am committing, or am about to commit a crime? Mercer stammered. Because there was no answer. There was no articulable suspicion. There was only bias. Only assumption. Only the belief that a black man didn't belong near an expensive car. I don't have to explain myself to you, Mercer said finally. Actually, under Terry versus Ohio, you do. If you're going to seize me, which is what detention is, you need reasonable, articulable suspicion. And you don't have it. Are you a lawyer or something? Or something? Judge Donovan Price had been in situations like this before. Not as the target, but as an observer. As an attorney. As someone who'd represented clients who'd been stopped, questioned, and detained for no reason other than the color of their skin. He knew how this worked. He knew the tactics. He knew the language officers used to justify unjustifiable stops. And he knew that fighting back, verbally, legally, asserting his rights, could make things worse, could turn a bad stop into a violent encounter. But he also knew that compliance wouldn't protect him, that showing ID wouldn't end the humiliation, that submitting to unlawful authority just reinforced the idea that officers could do this without consequence. So he made a choice. He reached slowly into his jacket pocket. Mercer's hand tightened on his taser. What are you doing? Getting my identification. Since you've made it clear you're not leaving without it. Keep your hands where I can see them. They are where you can see them. I'm reaching into my jacket. Slowly. No sudden movements. Price pulled out a black leather wallet and opened it carefully. Inside was his driver's license, his credit cards, and something else. A metal badge. Gold. Heavy. Official. He removed it from the wallet and held it up so Mercer could see it clearly. Superior Court of Pennsylvania. Judge Donovan Price. Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. The badge caught the evening light, gleaming with authority that couldn't be questioned or dismissed. Mercer's eyes went wide. His hand fell away from his taser. His mouth opened, but no words came out. Price's voice was quiet, controlled, but absolutely devastating. I'm Judge Donovan Price. Superior Court of Pennsylvania. I've been working all night in my chambers at the courthouse. I'm walking to my car, which is registered in my name, parked in a lot where I'm a resident. And you stopped me because you assumed a black man couldn't afford this vehicle. Mercer's face went pale. Judge, I didn't. You didn't know? Because you didn't ask. You didn't verify. You didn't do anything except make an assumption based on race and class. You were just profiling. And you did it on camera. Mercer's eyes darted to his body camera, mounted on his chest, recording everything. The red light was on. Had been on the entire time. Every word, every threat, every moment of this unlawful stop was documented. Judge, I'm sorry, I didn't mean. You meant exactly what you did. You saw a black man and decided he was suspicious. You demanded ID without cause. You threatened detention without justification. And you put your hand on your taser when I tried to assert my constitutional rights. Please, what's your badge number? Mercer fumbled with his uniform, reading the numbers aloud, his voice shaking. Price pulled out his phone and typed them into a note. And your supervisor's name? Sergeant Holloway. I'll be speaking with him. And with Internal Affairs. And with your department's legal counsel. Mercer looked like he was going to be sick. Judge, can we just forget this happened? Price's expression hardened. No, we can't. Because this happens every day to people who don't have my credentials, who don't have my authority, who don't have the legal knowledge to fight back. And they just have to accept it. Well, I'm not accepting it. And I'm making sure there are consequences. A second patrol car pulled into the lot. An older officer stepped out, Sergeant Holloway, responding to Mercer's earlier radio check. What's going on here? Holloway asked, immediately sensing the tension. Price held up his judicial badge. Your officer stopped me without cause, demanded ID without reasonable suspicion, and threatened detention when I asserted my rights. I'm Judge Donovan Price, Superior Court, and this entire encounter is on his body camera. Holloway's face went from confused to horrified in seconds. Judge Price. Yes. Holloway turned to Mercer, his voice low and furious. Get in your car. Now. Don't say another word. Go back to the station and wait for me. Mercer nodded and walked back to his patrol car, moving like someone in a daze. Holloway turned back to Price. Judge, I apologize. This should not have happened. No, it shouldn't have. But it did. And it's going to be addressed. I understand. We'll launch an investigation. I'm not relying on your internal investigation. I'm filing a formal complaint. And I'm considering legal action. Holloway nodded, knowing there was nothing he could say that would make this better. Price got into his car, started the engine, and drove away, leaving the sergeant standing in the parking lot. Realizing that his rookie officer had just destroyed his own career and exposed the department to catastrophic liability. What would you have done if a rookie officer talked to you like this? Even though you were the one with authority? Let me know. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like these need to be shared, and your support helps us bring more truth to light. By noon, the complaint had been filed. Judge Donovan Price didn't wait. He didn't give the department time to spin the narrative or control the story. He went directly to Internal Affairs, submitted a formal written complaint, and requested a copy of Officer Mercer's body camera footage. Within hours, the Pennsylvania Judicial Defense Union was involved. Within a day, the state attorney general's office had been notified. Within a week, civil rights advocacy groups were calling for a full investigation and public accountability. This wasn't just a bad stop. This was a sitting Superior Court judge, an officer of the state judiciary, someone whose authority and credibility were beyond question, unlawfully detained by a rookie cop based purely on racial profiling. The optics were catastrophic. The legal exposure was enormous. The political pressure was immediate and intense. Internal Affairs launched its investigation immediately. The body camera footage was reviewed by multiple supervisors, legal advisors, and the department's civil rights compliance officer. What they saw was damning. Officer Mercer approaching without cause. Judge Price calmly explaining his rights. Mercer demanding ID. Price declining. Mercer escalating. Price revealing his judicial credentials. Mercer's immediate panic. The timeline was clear. The violation was obvious. The defense was non-existent. Investigators also pulled Mercer's personnel file and found the pattern that should have been addressed months earlier. 3 prior complaints, all involving unjustified stops, all involving people of color, all dismissed with minimal follow-up. Training evaluations noting poor judgment and overaggression. Recommendations for additional supervision that were ignored. A rookie officer with 7 months of experience and a documented pattern of racial profiling. Cleared for solo patrol because the department needed warm bodies on the street. The system had failed, and now it was paying the price. The city attorney's office received the complaint and immediately recognized the problem. This wasn't a case they could settle quietly. This wasn't a civilian they could intimidate into dropping the complaint. This was a judge, someone with institutional credibility, someone with legal expertise, someone who couldn't be dismissed or discredited. And the evidence was irrefutable. The city attorney called an emergency meeting with the police commissioner, the mayor's legal counsel, and the head of internal affairs. We have a problem, the attorney said. A big one. Judge Price has grounds for a federal civil rights lawsuit. And if this goes to trial, we lose. Badly. The commissioner tried to mount a defense. The officer was responding to what? There was no call, no complaint, no suspicious activity. He saw a black man near an expensive car and made an assumption. That's textbook racial profiling. Maybe we can argue he was being proactive. Proactive policing doesn't mean stopping people for existing. The Fourth Amendment still applies. And Judge Price knows that better than anyone in this room. Silence. How bad is the exposure? The mayor's counsel asked. Worst case? 8 figures. Best case? High 7 figures plus mandated reforms and federal oversight. The room went quiet. Meanwhile, civil rights organizations were mobilizing. The NAACP Legal Defense Fund issued a statement calling for accountability and systemic reform. The American Civil Liberties Union requested all records related to Officer Mercer's training and prior complaints. Community leaders organized press conferences demanding answers. Legal experts appeared on local and national news, analyzing the case and predicting significant legal consequences. The Philadelphia Police Department tried to control the narrative, issuing statements about ongoing investigations, commitment to constitutional policing, and zero tolerance for misconduct. But the public wasn't buying it. Because the body camera footage, released through a public records request, told the truth. And the truth was undeniable. A rookie cop had racially profiled a superior court judge, demanded ID without cause, threatened detention without justification, and only backed down when he realized the man he was targeting had the authority to destroy his career. Officer Dylan Mercer was placed on unpaid administrative leave 3 weeks after the incident. He'd been interviewed by Internal Affairs, and his answers had only made things worse. I thought he looked suspicious. Based on what? Just the way he was dressed. The car. It didn't match. What do you mean it didn't match? Silence. Officer Mercer, are you saying you stopped Judge Price because you didn't think a black man in a hoodie should be driving a Mercedes? I didn't. I wasn't thinking about race. Then what were you thinking about? More silence. The deposition was a disaster. Mercer couldn't articulate reasonable suspicion. He couldn't explain his actions. He couldn't defend the stop. Because there was no defense. The Pennsylvania State Police Training Commission launched its own review, not just of Mercer, but of the entire Philadelphia Police Department's training and certification process. What they found was systemic failure, shortened training periods due to staffing pressures, inadequate psychological screening, minimal bias training, supervisors signing off on rookies despite documented concerns. The commission issued a formal report citing multiple violations of state training standards and recommending mandatory reforms. The department had no choice but to comply. Should police departments be allowed to hire rookies even before deep psychological bias screening is mandatory? Comment below. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like these need to be shared, and your support helps us bring more truth to light. 6 months after the incident, Judge Donovan Price filed a federal civil rights lawsuit. The complaint named Officer Dylan Mercer, Sergeant Holloway, for inadequate supervision, and the city of Philadelphia as defendants. The claims were comprehensive and devastating. Fourth Amendment violation, unlawful seizure without reasonable suspicion. 14th Amendment violation, racial discrimination and denial of equal protection violation of Pennsylvania's Civil Rights Act, municipal liability for inadequate training, supervision, and failure to address documented patterns of misconduct, intentional infliction of emotional distress. The evidence was overwhelming. Body camera footage showing the entire encounter. Mercer's personnel file documenting prior complaints and training deficiencies. Internal Affairs reports showing the department's failure to take corrective action. Expert testimony on racial profiling and Fourth Amendment standards. But the most powerful evidence was Judge Price himself, a sitting Superior Court judge. Unimpeachable credibility, expert knowledge of constitutional law, a professional reputation built on fairness and integrity. No jury in the country would side with a rookie cop who'd racially profiled a judge in a parking lot. The depositions were brutal. Mercer's attorney tried to argue that his client had acted in good faith, that he'd made an honest mistake, that there was no intentional discrimination. But the body camera footage destroyed every defense. Officer Mercer, You said Judge Price looked suspicious. What specifically about his appearance or behavior suggested criminal activity? I don't know. It was just a feeling. A feeling, based on what observable facts? Silence. Was it the hoodie? Partly. Is wearing a hoodie suspicious? It can be. Is it illegal? No. Was it the fact that he was black? No. I wasn't thinking about race. Then why did you assume he didn't own the car he was walking toward? No answer. The deposition went on for hours. Every question exposed another layer of bias. Every answer revealed the lack of legal justification. Mercer's attorney knew they couldn't win. The city's attorneys knew they couldn't win. Everyone involved knew this case was indefensible. Settlement negotiations began. The city offered $3 million initially. Judge Price's attorneys rejected it immediately. This isn't about money, Price told his legal team. This is about accountability. This is about making sure this never happens again. This is about sending a message that you can't racially profile people and walk away with a slap on the wrist. The city came back with $5 million. Price rejected it again. $10 million, his attorney said during the next negotiation session. Plus mandatory reforms. Plus independent oversight. Plus public acknowledgement of wrongdoing. Non-negotiable. The city's attorneys balked, but they also knew that if this went to trial, a jury might award even more. And the reforms? Those were coming whether they agreed or not. The State Training Commission was already mandating changes. Federal oversight was looming. They could settle now and control the narrative, or they could fight and lose everything in court. They settled. $10 million. Paid to Judge Donovan Price. The settlement also included public acknowledgement that Officer Mercer's stop was unlawful and racially motivated mandatory bias training for all Philadelphia Police Department officers, extended psychological screening for all new hires, independent review of all stops and detentions for patterns of racial profiling, creation of a civilian oversight board with subpoena power requirement that all rookies complete at least 18 months of supervised field training before solo patrol, annual reporting on stop data, complaints, and disciplinary outcomes. The reforms were sweeping. The settlement was historic. And the message was clear. Racial profiling has consequences. Officer Dylan Mercer was terminated 8 months after the incident. The termination letter was final and unequivocal. Officer Mercer engaged in racial profiling, unlawful detention, and conduct that violated department policy, state law, and federal constitutional protections. His actions have exposed the city to significant legal and financial liability and have damaged public trust in law enforcement. His employment is terminated immediately, and his law enforcement certification is revoked. Mercer appealed through the police union. The appeal was denied. His name was entered into the National Decertification Index, ensuring he would never work in law enforcement again, not in Pennsylvania, not anywhere in the United States. At 24 years old, his career was over. His future in policing, destroyed by a single decision made in a parking lot on a quiet March evening. Judge Donovan Price returned to the bench. When he entered the courtroom for the first time after the settlement, attorneys on both sides stood and applauded. Court staff joined in. Even the bailiffs clapped. It was unprecedented. Judges don't receive standing ovations. But this wasn't just about a case. It was about dignity, about standing up to injustice, about using power and privilege to protect people who don't have either. Price raised his hand for silence and spoke briefly. Thank you. But I didn't do this for applause. I did it because it needed to be done. Because what happened to me happens every day to people who don't have my credentials, my authority, or my resources. And they just have to accept it and move on. That's not justice. That's not equality. And until we fix the systems that allow this to happen, we haven't done our job. The room was silent. Then he sat down, picked up his gavel, and got back to work. Do you think civil lawsuit money actually changes future police behavior? Or do you think departments will keep ignoring bias until consequences get even bigger? Let me know. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like these need to be shared, and your support helps us bring more truth to light. Let's be clear about what happened here. No crime occurred. No threat existed. No emergency justified intervention. A black man walked to his car. That's it. That's the entire factual basis for Officer Dylan Mercer's stop. Everything else, the demand for ID, the threats of detention, The hand on the taser was built on assumption, on bias, on the belief that a black man in a hoodie couldn't possibly belong near an expensive vehicle. This wasn't about public safety. This wasn't about crime prevention. This was about perception, about who gets to occupy certain spaces, about whose presence is automatically questioned and whose is accepted without scrutiny. Judge Donovan Price changed more than just his own case outcome. The $10 million settlement sent a message. Racial profiling is expensive.
Morning, ma'am. Mind telling me what you're doing in this driveway?
It's my friend's place. I'm just heading out for groceries.
I'm gonna need to see some ID.
I don't have to show you anything. I'm not doing anything wrong.
Ma'am, don't make this hard. Hand it over, I can detain you right now.
You might want to rethink that. Federal Bureau of Investigation. You just ended your career, officer.
The body camera footage would later show exactly what happened that March 9th, 2023. Officer Jason Reed had only 8 months on the job when he detonated his entire future in a quiet Seattle suburb for absolutely nothing. He saw a black woman standing in her own driveway, putting her reusable grocery bags inside the trunk before heading to the store. No crime, no call, no threat. But in Reed's mind, that was enough. Emotion replaced policy. Bias replaced training. Suspicion replaced actual law. That black woman was Special Agent Kendra Lewis, a respected FBI field agent who spent 11 years dismantling interstate trafficking networks and violent criminal syndicates. What happened next would trigger federal inquiry, DOJ civil review, state attorney demands, and ultimately cost this rookie cop $9 million. Before we continue, where are you watching from? If this is your first time here, please hit that subscribe button. Stories like these need to be shared, and your support helps us bring more truth to light. March 9th, 2023, Seattle, Washington. The Axon bodycam footage begins at 10:23 a.m. in a suburban Seattle neighborhood. Thursday morning. Overcast sky typical for Pacific Northwest spring. Quiet residential street lined with well-maintained homes and mature trees. Officer Jason Reed's perspective shows him driving slowly through the neighborhood. 26 years old. 8 months with Seattle PD. Still operating with the dangerous combination of rookie confidence and insufficient judgment. His patrol route included this area, upper-middle-class suburb where actual crime was statistically minimal. Most calls involved noise complaints, package theft reports, and wellness checks. Routine policing requiring minimal intervention. The bodycam shows his vehicle slowing as something catches his attention. A woman standing in her driveway. Black female, late 30s, professional appearance. She wore workout leggings and a fitted jacket. In her hands were reusable grocery bags, the kind people gather before shopping trips. She was placing them methodically in the trunk of a dark sedan. Nothing about the scene suggested criminal activity. A person preparing to run errands from their own home. Ordinary suburban life playing out as it does in thousands of driveways daily. But Officer Reed's breathing on the bodycam microphone changed. Elevated slightly. The physiological response that precedes decision to intervene. He pulled his patrol car to the curb and exited. The camera perspective shows his approach, deliberate stride, hand unconsciously checking duty belt position, body language telegraphing official purpose rather than casual inquiry. Special Agent Kendra Lewis noticed the patrol car. She looked up from arranging her grocery bags with neutral curiosity. Not alarm, not guilt, just the normal response to seeing police in your neighborhood. "Morning, officer," she said, her voice carrying professional courtesy. Reed stopped approximately 8 feet away. "Ma'am, I need to ask you some questions." Kendra's expression showed mild confusion. "Of course. Is something wrong? What are you doing here?" The question landed oddly. Not "can I help you?" or "do you live here?" but "what are you doing here?" Phrased as if her presence itself required justification. "I'm loading grocery bags into my car before heading to the store." "What?" Reed's eyes scanned the driveway, the house, the vehicle. "This your residence?" "Yes. I live here." Kendra's voice remained patient, but an edge of awareness was creeping in. She had conducted thousands of law enforcement interactions in her FBI career. She recognized the tone, the body language, the unspoken assumption driving the encounter. "How long have you lived here?" 3 years. "Officer, can you tell me what this is about?" Reed didn't answer directly. "We've had reports of suspicious activity in this neighborhood." "What kind of suspicious activity?" "That's not your concern. I need to see identification." Kendra's posture shifted slightly. "Not threatening. But the careful positioning of someone who understood this encounter was not routine inquiry. I'm standing in my own driveway, on my own property, loading bags into my car. What specifically about that activity seems suspicious? Reed's jaw tightened. Challenge to authority. The thing rookie officers often interpret as disrespect requiring response rather than legitimate question deserving answer. Ma'am, if you refuse to cooperate, this is going to become a problem. I'm not refusing to cooperate. I'm asking you to explain the legal basis for demanding my identification while I stand on my own property, engaged in lawful activity. The legal language should have signaled something. Should have indicated this wasn't typical civilian unfamiliar with law enforcement procedures. But Reed heard only challenge. Perceived only resistance. What do you think happens culturally when officers start assuming ownership over who belongs on American property? Officer Jason Reed's body language shifted. The Bodycam captured it clearly. Weight moving forward onto the balls of his feet, shoulders squaring, hand moving to rest on duty belt near his radio. The universal physical vocabulary of escalation. This is a high-value neighborhood. We take security seriously. Kendra's expression hardened fractionally. High-value neighborhood. And you're questioning me, a black woman, standing in my own driveway. Is that what you mean by security? I didn't say anything about race. You didn't have to. You saw me and made an assumption. You decided my presence here required explanation. That's racial profiling. Reed's face flushed. I'm conducting a welfare check based on neighborhood watch protocols. Welfare check on whom? I'm clearly fine. I'm loading grocery bags. There's no distress. No emergency. No crime. What welfare are you checking? The Bodycam microphone picked up Reed's breathing. Faster now, shallower. The physiological signs of someone whose authority is being questioned and who lacks the experience to de-escalate rather than double down. Ma'am, final warning. Produce identification or I'll have to detain you for suspicious activity. Kendra stood very still. Her hands moved to her hips, positioning herself in a way that communicated neither aggression nor submission. Just measured assessment of rapidly deteriorating situation. Officer, I want you to listen carefully. I'm standing on my own property. I've committed no crime. I've exhibited no suspicious behavior. You approached me without reasonable suspicion and are now threatening detention. That's unlawful. Reed pulled out his handcuffs. The gesture was theatrical, designed to intimidate, to force compliance through implied threat of physical restraint. Turn around. Hands behind your back. You're going to arrest me? For what? Obstruction. Obstruction of what investigation? You haven't articulated any crime. But Reed had made his decision. Authority had been challenged. Compliance needed to be established. And in his 8 months of experience, he hadn't learned that sometimes walking away is the most professional response. Should an officer's feeling weird about someone ever count as investigative cause? To understand why Officer Reed's actions violated clearly established constitutional law, you need to understand several foundational legal principles. The first is reasonable articulable suspicion, commonly abbreviated as RAS. This standard comes from Terry v. Ohio, the 1968 Supreme Court case that defined when police officers can briefly detain someone for investigation. RAS requires specific, articulable facts that would lead a reasonable officer to suspect criminal activity is occurring. Officer Reed had no such facts. Kendra Lewis was loading grocery bags into her car in her own driveway. That's not suspicious activity. That's ordinary suburban behavior that millions of Americans engage in daily without police intervention. Walking while black is not RAS. Standing in your driveway while black is not RAS. Existing in an upper-middle-class neighborhood while black is not RAS. Yet all of these factors appeared to drive Reed's decision to approach and interrogate. You're not leaving until this is resolved. Kendra's voice remained controlled, but intensity increased. You're preventing me from entering my own vehicle on my own property? You're being detained pending investigation. Investigation into what crime? You still haven't articulated any violation of law. The investigation will determine that. The circular logic would later be analyzed by legal experts as textbook unlawful detention. Officer claims investigation justifies detention, but cannot identify what's being investigated. The investigation exists solely to justify the detention. Constitutional protections collapse under that reasoning. Kendra moved toward her car door. Reed's hand shot out, gripping her forearm. I said you're not leaving. Take your hand off me. You're under arrest for obstruction and resisting. I'm not resisting anything. You're assaulting me. Remove your hand. The physical contact escalated the encounter from unlawful detention to potential assault under color of law. Reed's grip on Kendra's arm was visible in the bodycam footage. Not gentle redirection. Forceful restraint. Kendra pulled her arm back. Reed's grip tightened. The struggle was brief but unmistakable. Both adults engaged in physical contest over whether Kendra would be allowed to enter her own vehicle. Neighbor Martha had pulled out her phone, recording from her lawn. I'm filming this. That officer is assaulting her. A second patrol car arrived. Officer Sarah Mitchell responding to Reed's backup call. Her bodycam activated as she exited her vehicle, capturing the scene from different angle. Reed gripping Kendra's arm. Kendra attempting to pull away. Neighbor recording and calling out observations. Mitchell approached quickly. Jason, what's the situation? Subject refusing compliance. Attempting to flee. Flee from what? What's the initial call? Reed's grip on Kendra loosened slightly as he turned toward Mitchell. Welfare check. Suspicious activity. Mitchell looked at Kendra, at the grocery bags visible in the car trunk, at the house behind them. Her expression showed she was rapidly assessing whether this encounter made any sense. Ma'am, can you explain what's happening? Kendra's voice was strained but articulate. I was loading grocery bags into my car. Officer Reed approached and demanded identification without reasonable suspicion. I asked him to explain the legal basis for his demands. He threatened arrest. He called for backup. He physically grabbed me when I tried to enter my own vehicle. Mitchell's bodycam captured her glancing at Reed with clear concern. Jason, what's the RES here? She was acting suspicious. Acting suspicious how? Standing in the driveway. Wouldn't provide ID. Mitchell's expression showed she understood immediately that this encounter had gone catastrophically wrong. Did she commit a crime? That's what I was trying to determine. But what specific behavior suggested criminality? Reed had no answer. Because there was no answer. The specific behavior was being black in an upper-middle-class neighborhood and not immediately submitting to police authority. At what point does command presence tactic turn into unlawful coercion? Kendra Lewis made a decision. She had maintained composure through escalating harassment, had articulated her rights clearly, had documented violations in real time through her verbal responses and neighbors' recording. Now she would end it. She reached slowly into her jacket pocket. Both officers tensed, hands moving toward weapons. Kendra kept her movements deliberate and visible. I'm reaching for my identification, which you've been demanding. My hand is going into my left jacket pocket. I'm pulling out my credentials. She extracted a black leather credential case and held it at chest height, where both body cams would capture it clearly. She opened the case. Inside was an FBI badge, gold shield, official seal, identification card with her photo. Special Agent Kendra Lewis. Federal Bureau of Investigation. 11 years of service. Current assignment visible. The silence was absolute. Reed's grip on her arm released immediately. His face drained of color. The bodycam microphone picked up his sharp intake of breath. Mitchell stepped closer, looking at the credentials with visible horror. Oh my God. Kendra's voice was quiet but carried federal authority that transcended local police hierarchy. Officer Reed, you just ended your career. She closed the credential case but didn't return it to her pocket. Held it visible as physical reminder of exactly who Reed had been harassing. You approached a federal agent on her own property. You demanded identification without reasonable suspicion. You threatened unlawful arrest. You physically restrained me when I attempted to enter my own vehicle. And you did all of this while being recorded from multiple angles. Reed tried to speak. His voice came out weak. I didn't know. You didn't need to know who I was. You needed reasonable suspicion that I'd committed a crime. You didn't have it. You never had it. What you had was bias. You saw a black woman and decided she required investigation. That's racial profiling. That's constitutional violation. That's the basis for federal civil rights lawsuit. Mitchell stepped back, creating physical distance from the catastrophe Reed had created. Her bodycam showed her expression, professional recognition that she'd just witnessed career-ending misconduct. Neighbor Martha called from her lawn. I got everything on video. Every second. Kendra nodded toward her. Thank you, Martha. Please send that footage to this email address. She recited her FBI contact information slowly, ensuring the body cams captured it. Reed stood frozen, handcuffs still in hand, face pale, breathing shallow. The rookie who had approached with such certainty now paralyzed by recognition of catastrophic judgment failure. "I'm filing formal complaint with Seattle PD Internal Affairs," Kendra continued, her voice measured and professional. "I'm filing report with FBI Office of Professional Responsibility. I'm requesting DOJ Civil Rights Division review this department's pattern of racial profiling. And I'm retaining private counsel to pursue Section 1983 civil rights lawsuit." She looked at Mitchell. "Officer, I need your name and badge number for the report." Mitchell provided it, her voice subdued. She understood she was now witness to federal case that would generate extensive scrutiny of Seattle PD. Kendra returned to her car, placed the grocery bag she'd been loading before this encounter began, and prepared to leave. "I'm driving to FBI field office now to file reports. This bodycam footage will be subpoenaed. The neighbor's recording will be evidence. And every word spoken here will be analyzed by federal attorneys." She got in her vehicle, started the engine, looked at Reed one final time through the window. "You had a choice. You could have driven past, could have waved, could have recognized that not everything requires police intervention. Instead, you chose to harass me, and that choice will follow you for the rest of your life." She drove away. The bodycam footage shows Reed standing motionless in the driveway, holding useless handcuffs, staring at empty space where his career had just evaporated. Should a federal badge be the only thing that finally makes cops stop abusing Black Americans? Within 2 hours, Special Agent Kendra Lewis was at FBI Seattle field office filing formal reports. Within 4 hours, her supervisor had notified FBI Office of Professional Responsibility. Within 6 hours, Seattle Police Department Internal Affairs had been contacted by federal authorities demanding preservation of all evidence. Officer Jason Reed was placed on immediate administrative leave. His bodycam footage was secured. Officer Mitchell's bodycam footage was secured. Neighbor Martha's cell phone recording was subpoenaed through formal channels. The video evidence went viral within 24 hours. Someone leaked the bodycam footage, whether from FBI, Seattle PD, or neighbor's phone became irrelevant. The encounter was public. The racial profiling undeniable. The harassment documented from multiple angles. Media coverage exploded. National networks aired the footage. Legal experts analyzed the constitutional violations. Civil rights organizations issued statements demanding accountability. Seattle Police Department issued statement acknowledging the incident was under investigation. Emphasized commitment to constitutional policing and community relations. Noted officer was on administrative leave pending review. But statements couldn't contain the damage. The optics were devastating. Rookie cop harassing Black FBI agent on her own property for loading grocery bags. Threatening arrest. Physical restraint. All without reasonable suspicion. FBI issued its own statement. Special Agent Lewis had served with distinction for 11 years. She had worked complex investigations involving trafficking, organized crime, violent offenders. She had risked her life for public safety, and she had been subjected to racial profiling in her own driveway. The statement was professional, but the implicit message was clear. This would not be quietly resolved. Internal Affairs investigation moved rapidly. The bodycam evidence was unambiguous. Reed had no reasonable suspicion, had violated clearly established law, had ignored multiple opportunities to de-escalate, had let ego override judgment. Interview with Officer Mitchell provided additional damaging testimony. She confirmed Reed had no articulated RAS when she arrived, that his justifications were vague and post hoc, that the physical restraint was unnecessary and inappropriate. Neighbor Martha provided her recording and witness statement, confirmed Kendra had been loading grocery bags, that no suspicious activity occurred, that Reed approached without apparent cause and escalated despite Kendra's calm responses. The evidence was overwhelming. Reed's termination was recommended within 3 weeks. The police union protested but had little leverage. The video was too clear. The victim too credible. The violation too egregious. Reed was terminated 8 months into his law enforcement career. The mistake he made in a suburban driveway would follow him permanently. But termination was just administrative accountability. The civil lawsuit would extract deeper consequences. Why do abusers only recognize boundaries after consequences show up? Special Agent Kendra Lewis retained one of the Pacific Northwest's most prominent civil rights law firms. They filed federal lawsuit under 42 U.S.C. Section 1983 alleging Fourth Amendment violations, racial discrimination, and municipal liability for inadequate training. Defendants: Officer Jason Reed individually and City of Seattle. The complaint was comprehensive. Detailed Reed's approach without reasonable suspicion. The unlawful demand for identification. The threat of arrest for asserting constitutional rights. The physical restraint preventing her from entering her own vehicle. The underlying racial bias motivating the entire encounter. The complaint also addressed municipal liability. Seattle PD's inadequate training on implicit bias. Failure to supervise rookie officers properly. Pattern of insufficient discipline for constitutional violations. Culture that allowed racial profiling to persist. Discovery revealed damaging information. Reed's academy evaluations showed he struggled with de-escalation scenarios. His field training reports noted concerns about aggressive enforcement style and difficulty accepting challenges to authority. None of this had prevented his graduation or certification. Seattle PD's broader training records showed minimal emphasis on recognizing and countering implicit bias. Limited instruction on Fourth Amendment standards beyond basic academy requirements. Insufficient ongoing education about constitutional policing. The city's exposure was substantial. Clear violations captured on video from multiple angles. Victim with impeccable federal credentials and credibility. Institutional failures in training and oversight. Pattern of inadequate discipline for similar conduct. Department of Justice Civil Rights Division opened parallel review. Not just of this incident, but of Seattle PD's broader patterns regarding racial profiling and constitutional violations. The investigation would examine stop data, use of force statistics, complaint handling procedures. The federal attention amplified pressure. This wasn't just one officer's mistake. It was potential evidence of systemic problems requiring federal intervention. Settlement negotiations began 9 months after the March encounter. Kendra's attorneys demanded significant compensation reflecting both the constitutional violations and the broader message needed about consequences of racial profiling. Medical experts documented psychological impact. PTSD from being physically restrained by officer. Anxiety triggered by law enforcement presence in her neighborhood. Violation of sense of safety in her own home. Economic experts calculated lost wages during stress leave from FBI. Costs of ongoing therapy. Impact on her professional effectiveness given traumatic harassment by local police while on her own property. The city calculated exposure at trial. Jury would watch Bodycam showing rookie cop harassing FBI agent for loading grocery bags. Expert testimony about racial profiling. Clear violations of constitutional law. Verdict would likely be substantial. Publicity would cement Seattle's reputation for problematic policing. The settlement was finalized 13 months after that March morning in the driveway. $9 million. The number made national headlines. One of the largest settlements in racial profiling case in Pacific Northwest history. The amount reflected severity of violations, victims' credentials, and city's desire to avoid trial publicity. Settlement included mandatory reforms. Enhanced training on implicit bias and constitutional standards. Independent review of stops and searches to identify racial profiling patterns. Civilian oversight board with authority to investigate complaints. Federal monitoring for minimum 3 years. Officer Reed's law enforcement career was over. His name permanently associated with viral footage of racial profiling. The settlement amount serving as reminder of financial consequences his actions generated. Do civil settlements actually reform behavior or only temporarily punish budget lines? Act 9, Post-Resolution Systemic Meaning. $9 million. Officer terminated. Federal reforms mandated. National attention forcing institutional acknowledgement of failure. By conventional measures, justice was served. But Special Agent Kendra Lewis still experiences anxiety in her own driveway. Still feels hypervigilant when local police pass her home. Still carries trauma from being physically restrained on her own property for the crime of loading grocery bags while black. Settlement compensates harm but doesn't prevent it. And prevention requires addressing systemic failures that produce officers like Jason Reed. The data tells consistent story. Black Americans experience police encounters at disproportionate rates even when committing no crimes. Studies document higher rates of stops, searches, and use of force against Black individuals compared to white people engaged in identical behavior. Kendra's case exemplified this pattern. White woman loading grocery bags in suburban driveway wouldn't have generated police attention. But Black woman doing identical activity triggered assumption requiring investigation. That differential treatment is systemic racism. Not individual hatred, but institutional pattern that consistently subjects Black people to scrutiny white people never experience. Reed probably didn't consider himself racist. Likely believed he was being vigilant, protecting neighborhood, investigating suspicious activity. His bias felt like professional judgment because cultural narratives had taught him to perceive Black presence in certain spaces as inherently suspicious. This is how racism operates in modern policing. Not through explicit hatred, but through unconscious assumptions about who belongs where and who requires scrutiny. Through training emphasizing control over communication. Through culture rewarding aggressive enforcement over thoughtful community engagement. The reforms mandated by settlement address symptoms. Better training helps. Enhanced oversight creates accountability mechanisms. But they don't transform fundamental culture that produces these outcomes. Real transformation requires acknowledging that policing has always operated differently across racial lines. That current practices perpetuate historical patterns of controlling Black communities rather than serving them. That institutional change requires more than policy adjustments. Requires confronting uncomfortable truths about purpose and practice of law enforcement. Kendra returned to FBI work, but the encounter changed something fundamental in how she navigated her own neighborhood. Made her more cautious, more aware that federal credentials don't prevent harassment. They just ensure accountability afterward. The settlement closed her case, but didn't close the larger issue. Somewhere today, another Black person is being stopped without cause. Another officer is making assumptions based on appearance rather than behavior. Another person is experiencing violation that won't generate $9 million settlement because they lack credentials commanding institutional response. That disparity reveals systemic reality. Constitutional rights exist theoretically for everyone. Practically, they're protected more reliably for some than others. Justice is more accessible when victims have resources and credibility that force institutional accountability. Until culture transforms, until officers learn to recognize bias before acting on it, until training emphasizes restraint over control, until institutions prioritize prevention over post-harm compensation, the pattern continues. Different neighborhoods, different officers, different victims, same fundamental violation, same systemic failure. Kendra Lewis got justice because circumstances aligned. Federal credentials, multiple camera angles, credibility that couldn't be questioned, resources for extended litigation. But most Black Americans subjected to similar harassment lack these advantages. Their violations happen in silence, compensated inadequately if at all, dismissed as isolated incidents rather than recognized as systemic pattern. Why does America still refuse to confront the fact that Black excellence still isn't seen as default, even when it's literally federal authority level? The Bodycam footage exists. The $9 million settlement is public record. Officer Reed was terminated. Federal monitoring ensures some reform compliance. These are facts. But documentation of injustice is not the same as prevention of injustice. And Kendra Lewis' case exposes how rare meaningful accountability actually is. She achieved justice because she had FBI credentials, legal expertise, financial resources, and institutional backing. Most Black Americans subjected to racial profiling have none of these advantages. The settlement sent message about financial consequences. But messages fade without sustained transformation. Individual accountability doesn't change culture that produced the violation. Somewhere today, another Black woman is being questioned for existing in space where someone decided she doesn't belong. Another officer is making assumptions based on bias trained into them through cultural narratives and institutional practice. Most of those encounters won't end with $9 million settlements. They'll end with humiliation, sometimes charges, occasionally violence. Almost always without accountability. That's the systemic reality individual cases can't address. Justice after the fact is better than nothing. But it's not prevention. And prevention requires cultural transformation.